Founded earlier this year by a group of Howard University School of Law alumni, including our very own Ama Romain, General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer of G6 Hospitality, the initiative identifies and funds programs that bring police and diverse communities together to build productive relationships. So recently I had the opportunity to hear Ama speak a little bit about the initiative. I expected her to talk in terms of plans and hopes for the future. Instead, she blew me away with the work that has been done so far and the practical and powerful information that she shared in just a few short minutes. So obviously I was left wanting to know more, and I'm so thankful of all of our panelists today for not only their time this afternoon, but their commitment to measurable results to improve the experience of policing at the local level. So I'm very excited that they will be sharing this with our chapter. I think it's just incredible, and you will all learn so much about this. So before I turn this virtual mic over to Ama, a few housekeeping items. As you know, every event has been in a virtual setting since March. You all know that this event is technology facilitated. So if you have any technical problems, please reach out to Shannon Graving or Stephanie Minkoff. They will try their best to assist you, but I think we all find that the best way to resolve these issues is to just leave the meeting and then log back in. The meeting today will be recorded. The panel presentation will be recorded, and it will be available for later. However, we do encourage you all to ask questions throughout the program. Everyone is on mute by default because we want to minimize echoes and background noises. So if you would like to speak, we encourage you to use the raise the hand feature on Zoom and then unmute yourself to ask a question. And then when you're finished speaking, please go back on mute. And now with that, I will pass the floor to Ama, who will share more about the amazing work and the important mission of this group, and will also introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. I'm so grateful. First of all, your introduction was powerful and beautiful, and it almost, needs no further intro. But, we're among friends today. This is just a really special day for me and for us at the initiative to be able to share the work that we're doing with our community, the legal community in particular. And Shannon, I also like to thank you for, just taking good care of us and bringing us into the fold, and also just for your commitment and engagement on this issue. I also want to thank each of you who's joined us today for the conversation, our partners and advisors, some of whom are here on stage with us, but some who are not, but without whom we would not have gotten as far as we have. And while they're not on the call today, we also want to thank our respective employers. The employers of each of the co-founders joined us on this journey when we started 5 short months ago, and for that we are incredibly grateful. So we have a great panel, and I want you to hear from them, not really from me. But I do want to share a little bit with you about our why, because I think it's important to ground our work in just helping you to understand how we got to this moment, aside from the obvious, right? So it was just a mere 7 months ago that we all witnessed the horrific killing of George Floyd, which came on the heels of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Christian Cooper, the Central Park Karen situation, which I think bears mentioning because of how that could have ended. This was not the first time we witnessed the killing of Black men at the hands of the police, and the data is also clear. Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely than whites to be killed by the police, and these statistics also extend to the brown community. So what made this different for us? As moms of Black children, and Black sons specifically, we felt compelled to act. We feel a sense of urgency and a duty to change the narrative. And to help explain our why, I'm going to share a couple stories that set the stage for the discussion today. And I sometimes share the stories and sometimes I don't, but I think the more time that passes, the more important it is for us to ground ourselves and remind ourselves that they're very human impacts to this situation. So earlier this year, just as the lockdown was setting in, my son got a new bike at his request. And just before he took off riding, he's 15 years old. He's 15 now, he was 14 at the time. My husband had, in quotes, the talk with him. And this is the talk that Black kids get before they start driving, before you can explain why they can't go to beach week, before they go to parties, before they go to the mall with a backpack, and the list goes on. These are conversations that we have in our house all the time. However, the consequences of that talk that day was that my son chose to never ride his bike in our Potomac neighborhood. Instead, I would see him riding his bike in circles in our driveway. It was painful enough to watch before George Floyd, but it became intolerable and unbearable after. I found myself unable to stop crying. And literally, there was one Friday that I was crying between every Zoom call. But even in the face of that pain, when we talked about building this organization, we focused on this. The status quo is no longer acceptable, but change is possible. Our legal training, built on a strong civil rights foundation from Howard University School of Law, taught us that systems can be changed with sustained, focused effort after the marching. And systemic change occurs when people with different viewpoints and experiences collaborate and find common ground. In fact, on the flip side of my story, Nadine shares that when she was talking to her son about George Floyd, she told him that there was a time, and he's 9, when he couldn't drink from a water fountain. And he looked at her like she had 5 heads. Simply put, that's our vision for the next generation of Black and Brown children. And we hope that after you hear from our panelists, who are all key strategic partners, and I mean, when I say partners, they are joined with us at the hip, you will share our collective view that change is possible when we all take the initiative and use our unique talents and resources to effectuate the change that we want to see. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over. I'm going to start with, I'm just going to go in order of who I see first. And I see Stoney Mathis first, who's he was actually our first police chief advisor. Stoney?
Yes, hello. Miss Emma, do you want me to go straight into what we're talking about, or you just want me to introduce myself?
Introduce yourself and share. So these first introductions are introduce yourself and why you were drawn to the initiative.
Okay, my name is Stoney Mathis. I'm a police chief in just Metro Atlanta. And 7 months ago, I met Miss Emma and Miss Nadine, and we talked about the things that have been going on in the country with law enforcement. And so I think we all agreed that there was a problem. And Miss Nadine said it most eloquently the other day. She said, what, so what, and what now? So we decided there's a problem. So we decided how can we fix the problem? And they spoke about coming up with how to improve community policing and improve the relationships that the police had with the community. So they came up with a scorecard. And that scorecard was a lot of fun to put together. And so that scorecard is meant for all police departments all over the nation to come up with an idea of where they stand as far as community policing goes. I'm a firm believer in community policing, and I hope I get a few minutes in a little while to tell you about community policing and where it came from and where we're at today. And I believe if every police department kind of embraces that community policing philosophy, we'll not only improve our services, but we'll improve the relationship we have with our communities.
Thanks, Stoney. Nadine?
Thank you for that. So we are building out the now what, right, Stoney? This is now what do we do? So Emma spoke, I mean, what she said spoke for myself as well in terms of where I was several months ago after witnessing the Ahmaud Arbery viral video and George Floyd's killing, and the fact that we simply couldn't absorb anymore, but we decided that we were going to do something about it. What was key, though, about this approach was collaboration. So because we took that approach, we embedded it in the name of the organization. It's called the Initiative Advancing the Blue and Black Partnership. And it was very clear to us from the beginning that there is no way that we're going to get to where we want to go, where Emma's son could freely ride his bike in Potomac and not worry about it, and my son would be as clueless about police and Black community tensions as he is about not being allowed to drink from any water fountain back in the day. Completely just like, what are you talking about? But we couldn't get to that point, right, without Stoney. We couldn't get to that point without our other police advisors and our community advisors, and you'll hear from Jeff, data. So we immediately embraced a collaborative approach. I can tell you, we are professionals. I'm a 2003 Howard Law School alumni. I'm a corporate attorney. I do participate in ACC and your distribution lists and so forth. And so as a professional, I fully expected to be able to work with anyone. You know, I could work productively with a Southern Georgian chief and anyone. But what I didn't expect was when you have a common mindset and approach to a solution, and you engage with each other respectfully, and you are open to hearing different views, and you're open to being stretched in your own viewpoint, that you can really develop just some phenomenal experiences and some end work product, for lack of a better word. We're all attorneys, okay, so we understand work product. It's just that much more better. So while I would not have recreated or chosen the means by which we entered into this initiative, it's heartbreaking, but I can tell you that this process and the work that we have done and are doing has greatly enriched me and expanded me in really powerful ways. So I am grateful for that.
Thanks, Nadine. Jeff?
Thanks, Emma. My name is Jeff Anderson. I'm Chief Growth Officer at Kaizen Analytics. My company, as the name might imply, is squarely in the space of data and analytics. Our mission is to make analytics actionable and accessible. I wanted to just tell you a brief story about how we got involved with the initiative, because I think we quite literally stumbled into this. Thank goodness we did. But it also shows the power of LinkedIn and communities and connections and collaboration. One of our account execs, he's hyper connected on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, the algorithm of LinkedIn, kind of promoted to him a podcast that Emma was doing on law.com. And I think it was for legal innovators. And it was an interview. And so he listened to it. He brought it to my attention. When I listened to that podcast, I was at the time initially kind of like doing the multitasking, but then some of the things that Emma was saying in that podcast just spoke to me and they moved me. And I was just, it was so profound in the concepts that she was employing, and that it was so different, and that using data and analytics and compliance and things that my company is good at. And I felt like, look, there's got to be an opportunity for us to figure out how we can help. So we reached out to Emma. She introduced us to Nadine, who is just an amazing dynamo. We have just enjoyed working with both of them so much. But why we are still involved, I think it's pretty simple, because we feel like we can make a difference. We feel like we can, or we want to make a difference. We feel like we can add value. And a lot of we're completely aligned with the initiative on how they want to go about this. And then I guess kind of the third thing is that we just absolutely love working with Nadine and Emma. So I appreciate you having me here today.
Thanks for being here. The feeling's mutual for all of you guys. Joy?
Hi there, I'm Joy Verplank with Milo Range Training Systems. We are a simulator company based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we have technology that teaches law enforcement officers in every type of organization. So we work with agencies from the municipal level through federal law enforcement. The legal training unit at the FBI Academy, for instance, uses it to teach constitutional law. And military organizations in 40 countries around the world. And we've been doing this since 1994. And we got involved with the initiative through a collaborative effort with the Neuroleadership Institute. And we were doing some work with them on de-escalation, but we remained involved with the initiative because personally, in my 20 years in this industry and with a background as a law enforcement officer, I've never seen anything like it. We've seen a lot of attempts to do things differently in this industry over the years, but this is the one that has the most potential to create significant systemic change with a data approach. And that's new and different for us. So we're in it for the long haul. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thanks, Joy. Kathy?
Thanks, Amma. We, as Joy mentioned, I have partnered with her. I am the head of Neuro Leadership Institute's public and social sector practice. And for 20 years, we united neuroscientists, leadership researchers, and organizational practitioners to try and transform how we think, develop, and perform. Our tagline is using science to make organizations more human. And the way we were introduced to the initiative is after the George Floyd murder, our founder, David Roth, felt that we had a societal obligation to step up to the moment. And he felt like neuroscience had something to offer. So he offered free de-escalation training that Joy referenced to all law enforcement for this year. Nadine and Amma reached out to us during this time, and we've been collaborating and working closely together ever since. We certainly see an ongoing need for de-escalation work, but they're also very interested in duty to intervene and how we might develop some training that can help law enforcement officers do the right thing in the moment. So we are deeply committed to the initiative. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Kathy. And finally, Lois.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Lois James, and I am a faculty member at Washington State University, where I research the impact of implicit bias and stress and fatigue on police officer performance and relations with the public. From about a decade of research in this area, grew a training program called Counter Bias Training Simulation, or CBT Sim, where we applied everything that we had learned and everything that we understand about what motivates officers and how their brains work and how they respond under stress and under fatigue. And we applied that in a training setting. My partnership, my collaboration with the initiative actually came via Joy, via Milo Range, who we have an exclusive licensing agreement with for the delivery of CBT Sim. And for me, the thing that's so exciting, you know, I mean, I'm a passionate believer in implicit bias training, but I think it's become increasingly clear that however well-intentioned, it really can only scratch the surface. You know, it's a necessary but not sufficient, right? You know, I mean, it's a great thing to do, but it's never going to really bring about systemic change. And that's where I think the power of the initiative lies. Is it's the first really comprehensive and holistic effort that I've learned of, that I've seen, that has the potential to make a really, really big difference and actually, you know, start to fix some of the problems that we have. So I'm thrilled to be able to contribute even a small wedge to that, and I just really look forward to where this goes.
Well, that's our panel, and I realize that it may sound like, what do all these people with these disparate skills, seemingly disparate skills, have, you know, what does it have to do with evolving policing? I promise it's going to become a little bit more clear through the course of this call. But, you know, I just really want to emphasize, like, we have best in class, just brilliant people who are giving their time and their energy and their soul to helping us make the world a better place. It sounds cliche, but it's true. And so I'm super excited. I think what we're going to do now is turn the floor over to Nadine and Jeff, who are going to share with you what Tamara alluded to earlier in the call, which is the tool that we've built, primarily in collaboration with Kaizen and Stony, Chief Mathis. It's probably more appropriate for the call. And from there, we're also gonna talk about the solutions, right? So one is like identifying the problem, and then the next, it's the now what, and that's where our researchers come in. So Nadine, floor is yours.
I'm going to demo the tool. It's called Central. But before we do that, I just want to quickly ground you into why we felt it was necessary to even create a community policing scorecard. And it's because it's one of those words, community policing, that really means either nothing to, I mean, there is no fixed definition. So you can have a robust agency like Chief Mathis has, which is fully integrated in terms of how it delivers community policing and how it's organized. Or you could have a police agency that does, coffee with a cop, or Halloween candy once a year, and they would swear that they're doing community policing. So who are we to tell them that they are not, unless we can benchmark best practices against each other, right? So we've interviewed a number of police chiefs, including, of course, Stoney Mathis, who's on this call, and other police executives, and we started to see redundancy, repetition in terms of what works and what doesn't. So being the lawyers that we are, we boil it down into something that's tangible and manageable, and then we used the brilliance and intellect of Kaizen to develop something that's tangible, again, work product. So that's what I'm going to demo for you. Let me just share my screen if I could. And this is the community policing scorecard. In terms of process, right now it's not fully integrated. We're still building that out, and it is becoming increasingly automated. But there was a first step, which was to complete an electronic survey. And then the data from that, the responses from that were pulled in into the database that you see here, the dashboard that you see here. The survey is broken down into 3 key areas: community engagement, officer training, and organizational development. And why these three areas? It's because each area reinforces the other. If you are the chief of a police agency and you have a lot of coffee with the cop and, backpacks for kids at Christmas, back to school time and things like that, that's certainly relevant and a part of community policing. But if your officers haven't been trained in how to engage with the community outside of a law enforcement or a criminal or service, call situation, or if internally you are not structured in such a way to incentivize your officers to engage in these community non-law enforcement type contacts, then your community engagement is almost for naught, right? Because you're not incentivizing and you haven't equipped your officers to do this effectively. So we graded the agencies across these three key categories. The dark blue bar is the police agency that completed the scorecard. The light blue is the benchmark, and it's fictitious at this point. Although this is the latest version, it actually might not be fictitious. And as you can see with this police agency, in terms of community engagement, it's off the charts. It's excellent in terms of neighborhood watch and all of the activities with citizens and ride-alongs and everything else. There are a lot of opportunities for officers and citizens to engage in outside of a confrontational law enforcement situation. Does this at a platinum level. Officer training, excellent. In terms of maintaining the types of trainings that would equip an officer to do this type of policing well. Personally, and I guess I really can't speak since I've never been a police officer, but I'm still going to speak. Personally, I think this type of policing is actually more demanding in terms of emotional resources. And so to continuously reset yourself in order to engage with someone in this manner that they actually gravitate to you, are not afraid of you, I think is actually more demanding and requires more training. So this agency does well with the anti-bias training, cultural awareness training, procedural justice training, problem-oriented policing, all of the things officers need to do this well. We do think, however, there's an opportunity to do this on a more informal basis. So maybe once a year annually, once a year formally, but then continuous reinforcement throughout the year would be helpful. Organizational development, without a doubt, this agency is organized internally to incentivize officers to live out the values and to act out the values of community policing. So in this particular agency, you will never get arrested for the number of arrests you make. Without more, that's not going to get you promoted. That is not the case with many other agencies where it's challenging. How they grade themselves is even based on, arrests and tickets and how many guns have been removed from the street, all really important things. But if you don't factor in other incentives to engage in community contacts, then it's just not going to get done. And I really think that that's to be expected. On the right side of the screen is the high level overviews of what the categories mean. We will be offering more bespoke recommendations as well, because the goal is not to tell a police agency what they're doing wrong. It's just to locate them along the continuum and then provide them with feedback of concrete steps that can be taken to move the needle a bit further. The next screen is a drill down of one of the categories. So this is a drill down of organizational development. And the subcategories are agency practices, communication, officer performance, and officer wellness. Again, the dark blue bar is the agency that completed the scorecard. In terms of agency practices and communication, these are things that, let's say in the corporate world, do you have a code of conduct policy? Do you have guidelines and things? And do you communicate your policy and guidelines throughout the organization? Well, police agencies, the ones who are really good at this, have an equivalent duty to intervene, certainly code of ethics, and how they communicate these values throughout the organization is relevant, just as it would be on the corporate side. This agency does very well, similarly with officer performance and measures, and how complaints are reviewed and acted upon, citizen complaints and so forth. In terms of how it factors into an officer's performance, this agency is excellent. In terms of officer wellness, I want you to notice two things here. It's less than the other two categories, but you'll notice that when you benchmark it against another agency, it's pretty comparable. So I'm not a researcher, so I can't tell you what that means, but in terms of just speaking with multiple police executives, police leaders, officer wellness is something that, if it's not framed the right way, can be perceived as a judgment against the officer, right? Even of the words, if you say PTSD disorder, no, it's not a disorder. It's just, Kathy could speak to it more, brain science, and how can you reset certain things that are going on in your body that are perfectly normal and actually quite healthy. So officer wellness is an opportunity, we think, especially if we want police officers to engage in this caliber of policing. And towards the end of the presentation, we can talk about the learnings that we are developing along with Joy and NLI and Lois and a wonderful organization called LRN, which dominates in the corporate, let me not say dominate, I'm an antitrust attorney by trade, which is very popular in the corporate space. And they have partnered with us and are doing tremendous trainings along with us for police officers. I'm going to skip to agency performance because I don't want to take up too much more time. And this is to just basically say, listen, we are, as Emma said, we're Howard Law School alumni, we're mothers of Black children. We had a very personal and deep need to try to get into the space and make a difference, but we're also kind of pragmatists, right? Like, we definitely want stronger relationships between members of the Blue community, Black and Brown community, all communities, quite frankly. But if community policing doesn't bring down crime stats, well, maybe we might need to pivot, right? So we are looking not just at the community policing scorecard, which is gold for this agency, but we're also comparing it with hard stats, crimes. Publicly available sources are pulled in, and we want to see where the data takes us. So in this particular agency, thankfully, you can't see the light blue line, it's 0, along with the fictitious gray line. In terms of fatal shootings by police in this jurisdiction. Similarly, no officers feloniously killed in this jurisdiction. If you look at the violent crimes, the dark blue line is the agency, well below the national average, and same story narrative with property crimes. If you change the agency and you go to a bronze agency, you will see some changes there. Is correlation causation? We don't know that yet. We still need more data, but look at that. This is a bronze police, community policing agency with crime stats that are above the national average. We think the data will absolutely show that the more effective a police agency is at community policing, where they've got an opportunity to develop strong relationships with citizens, that crime stats are going to go down, solve rates are going to go up, and everyone's going to be safer. no fatal shootings by police, hopefully, and no officers feloniously killed. So everyone within the community is safer. Emma, let me know how I'm doing on time. This is another view, another metric that we are taking in, data point that we're taking in. We're doing it ourselves because we haven't found a national database that is capturing citizen complaints per officer, service calls, misconduct lawsuits, assaults against officers, and use of force incidents. There are pockets around the country. I know the FBI started to collect use of force incidents. I don't know where that data is going, if it's still going anywhere. We haven't seen it. It hasn't been made public. And we think that these are the types of metrics where no matter where you start in the journey, you want to see continuous improvement over time in order to be able to gauge if what you're doing is effective. We want to see less misconduct lawsuits, right? If you are increasing in the community policing scorecard, maybe your misconduct lawsuits might be a metric that goes down. That's money in your pocket. That's money in your municipality's pocket. Maybe that's money in the police officer's pension pocket. We're not dictating where that goes. But these are how the ways in which you want to start to gauge effectiveness of what you are doing. And if it's not effective based on the data that we get, then we pivot, we revisit. The final view is a view of consent decree cities. And a consent decree in the world of policing is basically a settlement agreement between DOJ and a police department and a local, like a mayor's office. And within the Department of Justice, there's soon to be again, possibly a division called Patterns and Practices within the Civil Rights Division. And they would investigate police departments that were notorious for constitutional violations and other violations. And they would go in, sue the department, and then rather than litigate through the whole process, they would enter into a settlement agreement, which we can all appreciate, and it's called a consent decree in this space. Within the consent decree, I would say 80% of the recommendations are community engagement focused. So basically you have a court order telling a police agency to transform itself into a community policing organization. And so for that reason, we are tracking it. The stats are definitely, in terms of the fatal shootings by police, definitely higher than the national average. Sadly, 3 officers feloniously killed in these jurisdictions in the last 5 years. And violent crimes, this jurisdiction, the national average, yes, it's higher than the national average, or actually it's lower than the national average. And similarly with the property crimes. So we're seeing different data points, and we just want to track over time and see if in fact we can see a causation between this type of policing and a depression on crime rates and violent crime. So
thanks, Nadine. That was excellent. I know we may have some questions, but before I turn the floor over to folks to ask questions, I think I'd like to have Stony share a little bit about why community-oriented policing. So Nadine talked a lot about that. That's sort of like the philosophy, the basis for the approach that we're using and that we're advocating. So Stony, could you just share a little bit about the history of community-oriented policing and why you believe it works and why you believe it's effective?
Absolutely. First, I'd like to say I worked in a relatively large agency with over 300 police officers. I've worked in an agency with less than 20 police officers, and right now I have about 50. So these community policing initiatives that we've all been talking about work. They've worked in every jurisdiction I've been that I've worked at, and so they have proven to work. And when Nadine's talking about that scorecard, a lot of these agencies that we spoke with, they didn't score very well on the scorecard simply because they saw what we were trying to gauge, and some of them failed to complete the scorecard that we sent them. So that was a little bit of a problem. Community policing, that's big on the news right now, and people are talking about that. And people really don't realize this is not anything new. It actually started about 200 years ago with a guy named Sir Robert Peel. And Sir Robert Peel is the person that started the London Metropolitan Police Department, and he implemented several community policing initiatives almost 200 years ago that are still effective today if police chiefs throughout the nation would embrace that philosophy. And I just wanted to read something real quick. And this was written 200 years ago by Sir Robert Peel. The goal is preventing crime, not arresting people. That's one of the things he believed in. Our goal is not to see how many people we can arrest. It's about reducing the crime rate. And he also says that you cannot reduce the crime rate without a sustainable relationship with the community that you serve. One of the coined phrases that he uses is the people are the police and the police are the people, meaning that we're all in this together, and it's all of our responsibility to work with each other, to respect each other. And if we do that, it's going to reduce crime. Community policing was thrown into the limelight, and you guys probably all remember this, back in 1991 with Rodney King. And it wasn't that was the first time that took place. It was on video. That's why it went to the forefront about community policing, and the government threw a lot of money into community policing. It was called the Government Cops Program, if you guys remember that. And that was, and it started actually 1991 is when the Rodney King thing happened. 1992 is when the LA riots took place. 1993 is when they started throwing all this money in community policing. The problem is they didn't tell any of the police chiefs how to utilize the funds or the people they were putting in those positions. So police chiefs thought, wow, I'm going to get 2 or 3 free positions paid for by the federal government. Let me get them and let me put them out on the street. Problem is, we were hiring brand new police officers, putting them in these special units called cops units, and sending them out on the street, not even knowing how to be a police officer. So we plugged along a couple of years, and probably about 1995, the police chiefs got smart, and they said, oh, here's what we do. We'll hire new police officers, put them on the road so they get some training, and we'll have experienced police officers go out on the street and build these relationships with the community. And they did that, and it was working pretty good. But see, that was not the idea. The idea of community policing is the entire police department understand the philosophy of community policing, not 1 or 2 special units. And just like Nadine said, it's not shop with a cop once a year or give out candy or coffee with a cop. It's actually more than a philosophy. It's an organizational design that has to take place, starting from the chief all the way down to the newest police officer, has to kind of take on this idea of community policing. But if you remember, what happened is about 1999, we started getting pretty decent at community policing. Then 9/11 happened. We completely got away from all community policing. We went to more of a tactical type uniform. We went to more of a tactical type training. And so all the community policing efforts that we had done the last few years were thrown out the window. And so then we plugged along for a few more years, and all these incidents started happening, the Trayvon Martin thing, the Michael Brown thing, the Freddie Gray thing, all those things happened. So they said, we better start this community policing thing back up. So President Obama put together a task force of community policing. And that task force took community policing to the next level. And they came up with basically some pillars, and they were the 6 pillars of community policing. But the 6 pillars are this: it's building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime prevention, training and education, and officer safety and wellness. Everything that we've talked about, that task force put those things in place. But the problem is there's no scorecard for police departments that are utilizing that stuff. There's no gauging on what if they utilize these techniques will reduce crime. But I'm here to tell you that if they utilize the techniques that Nadine and Miss Emma came up with, they can reduce their crime rate. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is build a relationship and reduce the crime. But that's basically where we're at today with community policing. And with this latest few things that have taken place with Aubrey and Mr. Floyd, see, these things are just shoving it back into the limelight. But if we don't mandate some of these police departments to kind of start utilizing some of this information that's readily available, then we're going to go back into the same situation we're in before.
We're not doing that. if we have anything to say about it, we're not doing that. So thank you, Stony. That was, I just love when you share that history lesson, because I think it's just so important for us to understand how we got here. I think the other piece of the coin is the data, right? So you guys could see that the tool that we use is very data-centric. And so I'd like Jeff Anderson to share a little bit about his perspective on how data can be used effectively to shape all organizations up to and including this work that we're doing now.
Yeah, thanks. What you saw there from Nadine in the demo, we were able to stand that up pretty quickly, probably within, call it 3 to 4 weeks, that initial version. And then, Kaizen, continuous improvement, which is another foundational component that Nadine and Amit had talked about initially to us, that they love that concept. So you stand something up as quickly as you can and accurately as you can, and then you enhance it over time. And so the latest versions, we're just continuing to enhance it. So that's kind of the core approach that we take, and what we've seen work the best. In this day and time, and I think all of you can appreciate this, regardless of how much data and analytics you've done or what have you, the speed of everything is moving so fast in many of these areas. And so being able to take a lot of data that is just all over the place in terms of granularity and frequency and all these different things, and being able to stand that up quickly and then enhance it is really key. There's numerous examples of failed data and analytics projects out there that litter the landscape because of they just didn't move fast enough. And so that was very, very important to us. And the fact that the initiative was on such a fast timeline and wanted to show results plays right into our strength and how we attack this. So we've seen everything. We feel like we're still pretty foundational here with the initiative. In the analytics space, you kind of start with the foundation, then you move on to the next step, being more predictive. And a lot of times that's when people talk about data analytics, they're really inferring that it's predictive, but there is a ton of value. And I mean, the client that I'm here with today sees lots of value in just being able to see what is going on, kind of going back to what we said earlier, the what, and then the so what, right? And how to kind of improve it from there. So we see a lot of opportunity just in kind of the stage that we're at now, foundationally looking to see where things are, setting up all the automated capabilities so that when the new police chief comes in and wants to be part of the program, that they enter their survey and everything else updates. The other agencies that are already on board can see the results and how they compare to, kind of across the board. So setting all that piping up, getting it all set up, but then ultimately moving into more of a predictive state. We haven't talked much about that with the initiative, but that opportunity is there, just like it is for many of the other clients that we work with. And then you kind of where it all goes ultimately is toward a prescriptive state. And when you look at companies that are out there using advanced algorithms to price their goods and services, that's a great example of how companies can be very prescriptive with analytics, because they're forecasting demand, they're looking at price elasticity, they're adjusting their prices some dynamic variable period based on that, and all that's happening so fast, right? So we're a little ways from that with the initiative, but still we feel like huge business value and opportunity just in some of these earlier stages. And we've just been really excited to kind of bring that to bear and help enable the vision that the initiative has. I don't know, Emma, does that help out?
That's actually perfect, because it really talks about the future, right? Where we can go. So this is just the beginning, but we have to start somewhere. And I think a lot of the challenge that we have today is that there's a lot of emotion around this issue appropriately, which makes it very difficult for us to have meaningful conversations about what needs to change. I mean, there's the obvious, but how we get there. And the data really just grounds everyone, right? It's just like, this is where we are. And now let's talk about what tangible steps we can take to move in a different direction, to move forward. And, you know, Jeff is pretty humble, but I will say that when he met Nadine and I mean, we've come a long way. We were like, we need a database. And and clearly you could see that what they've built for us is a lot more than a database. They understood what we were trying to do, but, you know, as lawyers, we didn't really articulate it in the best way. But it's just amazing what they've helped us be able to do, and what we know this tool will be able to do for our communities, ultimately, in the end, right, which is make them safer. I want to switch gears because I know that time is going really quickly, and talk a little bit about training. So this is sort of, you know, we've talked about the what, and now we're going to talk about the now what, which is, you know, some of the changes that we're going to be putting in place. There's one person who asked a question about, you know, bad apples, like one bad apple being one place and then going to another. I think it's a good question. Those types of issues are embedded in our philosophy and embedded in our approach. So the way that we get to the score of the agency is through a survey that we've created with a scoring methodology. And the types of things that we're scoring, it's designed to drive the types of behaviors and organization that we want, like that Stony was describing. And clearly one of the things that we don't want is to have a bad apple move from one agency to another, right? So those are the types of things, and that's an organizational development issue, right? That's how the agency is structured and how it's managing itself. So those are the kinds of things that we're attempting to assess through our tool. I want to switch gears. So we have Joy, Kathy, and Lois, who are all sides of the same coin, if you will. And it's really this is really about training, right? It's really about how we improve policing. So Joy, I'd like you to share a little bit about your understanding of the historical shoot, no shoot approach to training in police agencies, and how you believe this training needs to evolve to address our current challenges, and what Milo is doing to move the needle.
Sure. Well, so the industry started in the early 90s with a firearms training simulation approach. So it was a way for cops to get proficient in their weapons without having to spend money and go to ranges and shoot bullets. And they decided to, they transitioned it into a judgmental shoot or no shoot approach. And their early versions of this technology was standing in front of a video screen of somebody standing at a door, and the officer would approach the door for a routine call, maybe a domestic violence call, and the person would really rapidly take something out of their pocket, and it would be an ID card or a flip phone or a gun or a knife, and the officer simply had to decide in a split second if they were supposed to shoot or not shoot. And over the years, it has developed, and Milo Range has had one of the greatest features of the Milo Range training system is also the most unused, which is the knowledge base. We have a repository where you can upload dash cam footage and case studies and things to evolve the training rooms so that they can get more out of the simulation training. But in reality, what happens is police officers, police instructors, even at academies, are not trained educators. And so it really does them a disservice. Well, what the initiative is enabling us to do in this training space is provide tools for where the instructors really need the help in using in a lot of cases, tools that they already have. I mean, you all are in a space that's heavily occupied by Milo Range. Most of the people on this call are served by police officers that are trained with a Milo. And the initiative is going to help us help them use it better.
Thanks, Joy. Something you were saying, it triggered, when you talked about the shoot, the training for an officer to react and make a split-second decision. I've seen studies that talk about bias and the role that bias plays in that split-second decision. So I think it's a great time for Lois to jump in and share a little bit about her perspective on from her bias research or anti-bias research.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, from the research that I've done in the lab, we kind of pioneered the approach of using force option simulation as a method of measuring, influences on officer decision making. Because before that, it was really the more kind of traditional press a button for shoot and press a button for don't shoot to determine the impact, for example, of citizen race on officer decision making. But in addition to the work that we've done, I've been, very, very fortunate to be in this space and to have become extremely familiar with all of the research on this area. And, I think that it really does bear mentioning, because there are people who just still flatly either refuse to believe or just are a bit incredulous that, there are clear and irrefutable differences in how officers police. And do I think that's because officers tend to be racist? Do I think that that's because officers tend to make poor decisions? No, I don't. But implicit bias, it creeps in when you don't necessarily expect it to, and just like Emma's saying, in those split-second moments, right? That's when it can come up and it can blindside you. So my mission now, and what we do with this training, is to try and make officers aware of what it is that they don't know yet about themselves. What it is that influences them, that's going on in the background. And this is where I fit so well with the work of NLI, because it is all neuroscience, right? It's like, what does your mental filter look like? Because how you see the world is going to influence the decisions that you make and how you respond. So that's the approach that I come from.
Thanks, Lois. And, this is also a great segue to Kathy, right, which is, when we talk about implicit bias, we know there's been a lot of discussion in the public domain about, and a lot of emotion, I think, around this question of implicit bias, and are we saying that everybody's racist, and is it, So Kathy, I love the work that NLI is doing, because I think it really just, it erases those conversations, right? It's really not about racism. It's not really about you're a bad person, I'm a good person. Could you talk a little bit about the brain science around bias and trauma and just the work that NLI is doing in this space, which I really think is just best in class?
Yes, thank you so much for that. And as Lois mentioned, this is a part of work that's going on across many organizations right now. What we found is that this particular community responds very well to evidence-based approaches. And by creating this de-escalation session and helping folks understand what was happening in their brain, and describing the fact that in our world, we say if you have a brain, you have bias. It reduced the defensiveness on the part of the participants, and they verbalized that. And we were fortunate to partner with Milo Range, and they created scenarios and so forth. So as we talked about social threat and reward, and what levels of threat meant, and how what that triggered in both an officer as well as a citizen who might be interacting with that officer, by having that explicitly described and shown to these officers, and then going through the process of learning how to reduce that threat, and what are those things that officers can learn that can change behaviors in the moment and allow for a better outcome from a stop or anything else. But we use sticky and memorable models, and we believe very strongly in focusing on the essential and not the exhaustive. We want to make sure that someone can recall what they've learned and use it in the moment. So I'd be delighted to share anything with the group, any of our journal articles or anything else that might be of interest.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm looking at the time. I know we have like 4 minutes left. And what Kathy just talked about with the training being sticky, you know, it's one of the things that we are really committed to. So I think what we have seen thus far is, you know, when something bad happens, the natural reaction is to like fix the bad thing, right? So let's just go get a de-escalation training and train everyone on de-escalation. Or maybe it's bias. Let's go train everyone on bias. And these one-off things are not going to move the needle. We firmly believe that. What we really need is to be holistic. We need to explore a range of modalities. People learn in different ways. And then think about even the time that they have in order to learn, right? And reinforcing messages. So that's really the approach that we're going to be taking. We have a video that takes 1 minute that we're going to share at the end that gives you sort of a glimpse into the approach that we're taking, the novel approach that we're going to be taking to training. But since I would like to at least open the floor for like one question or two questions before we share the video, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I want to thank Robert, who I see like busily raising funds while I speak. I'm just like, I can't even keep up. I'm trying to follow the speakers, but I see numbers and I get excited. So thank you all for just joining in. You know, I mean, it means so much to us. There were folks who are here who had donated before. We appreciate the donations now. It's just, it means the world to us, because honestly, this work can't happen without your support. So questions, burning questions. There must be one. These are lawyers.
I know.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
Okay, all right. You want to cue the video then?
Oh, here's one.
It's a thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, well, we'll take that as a good sign that a bunch of lawyers don't have questions. Let's move into the video. I'm going to share my screen again. It's really quiet at the beginning. Before I do so, I'm going to frame it for you. It really is a mindfulness training for police officers, but of course we don't call it mindfulness, because what police officer would take that? And it was developed and designed with our subject matter experts, but with the phenomenal expertise and talent of LRN, which is a corporate compliance and ethics company. And they wanted to contribute in this space of policing. And so we gave them an opportunity to do so. So I'm going to play the video. Let me just share my audio. And it's very quiet at the beginning. I'll turn up my... And it's 1 minute and 19 seconds.
As a member of law enforcement, you're expected to be a protector, a comforter, a warrior, a hero, a counselor, a guardian. You serve the community, your community. That's a lot. Being so much to so many requires endurance. Endurance doesn't just happen. It takes training of the body and the mind. Operation Brain Strategies will help prepare you to sustain the rigors of your role. Train your brain to respond, not react, and to pause, reflect, and decompress.
Sorry for the glitches. I think that was my Wi-Fi.
It's okay. The pause actually came at the right time. So we are at exactly 5:30. I would like to just, again, thank our panelists for joining us and sharing your perspectives, which I'm sure this, you know, everyone was just pleased to hear about. And it really just underscores that we, you know, that we can do great things when we all come together and use our talents, whatever they are. I mean, if you look at our website, you'll notice we have some artwork on there. That's just a recent graduate from SCAD who's an artist who, you know, we talked to about our vision, and she just used her talent to create some artwork that really reflects our mission and reflects what we're trying to do. So we just encourage you all to get involved to the extent that you can. Support us from the sidelines. We're going to keep going. And thanks to the ACC and Tamara and Shannon, this was just, it was just really powerful to be able to share this, our work with you guys. So thank you.
Well, and on behalf of ACC NCR, thank you so much. We know all of you have taken your time today, but more importantly, thank you for the work that you're doing. We hope this is just the beginning of our efforts together to amplify and inform others about this important work. I'll do a last minute pitch. I'm floored by Rob, just like everyone else, and his generosity and his leadership. So if anybody wants to contribute to his match, check out the chat. If you've been fixated, I think I was like you, I was so torn. I kept going back and forth to the screen and the chat. You can still do that. But we're so grateful for everything that the panelists have done for this project and for sharing your time today. This is recorded and we'll be sharing this. So if you want to share it on social media, pass it along to your friends. I know we've also talked about wanting more and more departments to know about what you're doing. If you have connections in your community, we've got an incredible reach with our membership and our sponsors, and we hope we can support you in lots of different ways in this again, just an incredible effort. Thank you. And if it's okay, we'll leave it open. I think most folks will have to drop off, but I don't know, Amma, if you have a minute, if anybody does want to ask a question privately, or any of our other panelists can stay on for a moment. Those who need to drop off, please do, but we can keep the line open if anybody wants to ask a couple of follow-up questions. But otherwise, happy holidays, everyone, and we look forward to members and sponsors coming to our next event.
So I want to thank you all for giving us this opportunity to share with you what we have been doing with the initiative. We brought a wonderful panel to engage with you about how we're using data and technology and expertise in the field and community input and neuroscience, and all of these just phenomenal skill sets are being brought to bear on this issue. But what we don't want you to forget is that these are real lives impacted. My family, my life, my children's lives. This is not an academic exercise. And so we really need you, even as the news cycle shifts, even as a whole new set of issues I'm sure will dominate the news cycle. We need you to be engaged, and we need you to stay involved, because we cannot accept the status quo any longer on this issue. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amma Romain, who is the other co-founder, and she will let you know what the call to action is and what we need from you all right now. Amma?
Thanks, Nadine. As Nadine said, we really appreciate having the opportunity to share with you all the work that we've been doing, not alone, but in collaboration with so many people who've stepped in and stepped up to really make a difference at this time. And even on this call, during this panel discussion, it was just really gratifying and heartwarming to see so many people engage immediately in the moment to try to assist us on this journey and to join us on this journey. And for those of you who weren't able to join live but are having the opportunity to review, to view our discussion, and for those who are still remaining engaged with us, there are some very specific things that you can do to get involved and to stay involved. I just talked about the donations that were made, and obviously donations are always important and helpful for capacity building and just to make sure we can do the work that we're doing. But right now, we really do need to connect with local leaders and police chiefs across the country and police officers, frankly, across the country who are interested in being a part of this solution. And all of you have family across the country. You may be living in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, but you may have contacts here and in other places. Our primary goal right now is to get agencies to participate with us, to join Central, to help us learn together how we can make that tool a useful one for measuring the effectiveness of how we police our communities. Another way that you can get involved, obviously, is through financial support, either personally or through your companies, just advocating for having your company make an investment in an organization that's new, but doing great things and having a measurable impact, which is really central to our mission. And finally, there are some other initiatives that we're working on aggressively, but they're not quite ready for prime time. Some of them will need people with legal expertise. And so if you share your contact information with us through the website, and the information will be available at the end on a slide at the end, we'll be able to follow up with you directly when we have more specifics to share. So thanks again for joining us, for taking the initiative, and we really look forward to working with you.